First of all, I'd just like to welcome and thank everyone here for making the time to be here to celebrate the life of Dr. Jim Watson. This is indeed a celebration of his life and all the contributions he made to his friends, those who he mentored, those who were mentors to him, and especially his students. And all of us send our heartfelt condolences to Trish, his wife, and the entire Watson family. For those of you I haven't met, I'm R.J. Podesky. I'm a proud Millikan alum, and I currently serve as Dean of the Tabor School of Business. This morning, we pay tribute to Dr. Jim Watson through stories from his colleagues and his students. Dr. James Oliver Watson passed away April 13, 2026. Jim was born December 28, 1944 in Olympia, Washington, to Eileen C. Beatty and Archibald H. Watson, joining sister Carol. He received a bachelor's degree from the University of Washington and a PhD in economics from Purdue University. He began his teaching career at Lake Forest College in the Chicago suburbs before joining the faculty at Millikan University in 1979. He taught in the Tabor School of Business until 2007. After his initial retirement, he continued teaching part-time and ended his career as the interim dean in 2012. Jim loved teaching and particularly enjoyed his international business course, where he co-taught with other members of the faculty, and you'll get to hear from Dr. Mark Munoz a little bit about that later. Each year, the students and faculty would work for an international company, developing a plan to solve real business problems. This often included a class visit to each company's headquarters in places like the Dominican Republic, Mexico, Zambia, and Italy. He was a mentor and friend to many on campus throughout his tenure. He met his wife, Trish Overmeyer, at Purdue University in 1968, where she first saw him reading the Wall Street Journal. They were married in Culver, Indiana on June 10, 1972. They have two sons, James Matthew, living in Vienna, Austria, with his three children, Erica, Charlotte, and Henry, and Adam, living in Chicago with his daughter, Leela. Jim and Trish frequently open their homes and their hearts to international and exchange students, forming lifelong connections with Christian Glanz from Frankfurt, Germany, who's here today with us. Thank you for making that travel as well. Andrei Martinov from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and Okan Usal from Fethiye, Turkey. Jim's hobbies include hiking, biking, sailing on Lake Decatur, and kayaking on Puget Sound. He passed these pastimes on to his sons, taking them for many years on camping trips with the Boy Scouts. He also enjoyed playing cards. He played bridge with his colleagues for over 40 years, and family gatherings in Indiana always included time spent playing cards. He also loved traveling with his friends and family. Jim never lost his love for teaching and began tutoring at Brush College in Dennis after his retirement. His survivors include his stepsisters, Lou Tamberlin, Diane Burgens, stepsister-in-law Oma Watson, and several nieces and nephews. He was preceded in death by his parents, his sister Carol Nyland and her husband Richard, stepfather Carl Sulens, and stepmother Gloria Watson. When I was a student, which that time is getting further and further away from me now that I realize this, I never had the privilege of having Dr. Watson in class, unfortunately. But I always had several classmates who would come back to the dorms or to our apartment and speak so highly of his classes. In particular, I remember Dr. Watson teaching an interdisciplinary class that some of my classmates had titled From Russia with Love. And it signaled just how he saw the intersection of business with the entire world. I really got to know Jim much better in 2012 when I joined the Tabor faculty, and he was interim dean for my first year. He attempted to remind me not to say yes to every opportunity, which I still have a hard time doing, but that's neither here nor there. But he was always supportive and encouraging with a positive attitude. But don't be fooled, because I remember that conversation would often turn into something academic and intellectual at the blink of an eye. He visited my classes to observe my teaching and was instrumental to me in my first year after I joined the faculty. In short, he was always teaching. It didn't matter who it was, but he was always teaching. One of Jim's former students, Philip Lim, reached out to me after his passing and had these words to share. I was deeply saddened to receive the news of Professor Watson's passing. I'm from Malaysia and graduated from Millikan in 1995 with a major in international business. Professor Watson guided me throughout my days at Millikan and even encouraged me to spend a semester at American University in Washington, D.C., where I gained invaluable exposure to the workings of the IMF and the World Bank. His teaching had a direct and lasting impact on my career. I began as an interest rates and currency trader at a global bank, where the lessons from his international finance course proved immediately relevant. Today, I lead one of the top equity derivatives teams at a Malaysian investment bank, and the concepts I learned from Professor Watson remain the foundation of my work and decision making. I also fondly recall Professor Watson and Professor Sharon Alpe in Penang during their student recruitment trip to Malaysia in 1996 and 1997, while fellow alum Mr. Lim Sang Yam hosted them in Kuala Lumpur. These memories feel both vivid and like another lifetime. Another one of Dr. Watson's students, Blaine Mathis, class of 2004 and MBA class of 2014, also shared this. Dr. Watson was a fantastic professor and leader. I remember his fun spirit and desire to make what could be technical very relatable and interesting. I always enjoyed the random chats and his good-natured approach to interacting with us students. He impacted a lot of us students and was a great representation of the best Millikan has to offer. We'll hear some other stories from some students and their perspectives after a while that they sent in. But at this time, I'd like to ask one of his colleagues, Dr. Mark Munoz, Professor of Management, International Business, to share a few of his remarks about Jim.
Good morning, everybody. It's an honor and pleasure to offer a few words today to celebrate the life and career of a beloved Tabor colleague, Dr. James Watson. The truth is, I'm not sure I would be here today if it were not for Jim, and I really mean that. He was part of the committee, perhaps he was the chair, of the search committee that hired me about 25 years ago today. The committee, headed by Jim, decided to take a risk and hire a business executive living in New Jersey who had an MBA and a PhD, but no teaching experience or a single form of scholarship. It was a huge risk back then, but they took the chance, and here I am, 25 years later. The rest is history. That decision allowed me to start from scratch, start a new career in academia, and it has been a long and fulfilling career. So much thanks to Jim and some of the colleagues here today who were there at that time. As I think of the times that I spent with Jim, 5 of his endearing attributes come to mind. One, internationally driven. Jim taught international business for many years and was passionate about the subject. We team taught the course International Business Consulting with Rick Bibb and Sharon Alpe, and did class projects for companies and countries around the world. The projects led us to trips with students to places like Dominican Republic, Mexico, Italy, and Zambia. And these projects demanded a lot of time and effort, both in class and on ground. On one occasion, Jim, Rick, and I were packed in a back seat of a small car in the Dominican Republic, where, Sharon would remember this, where we rode through unpaved, potholes-filled roads for maybe around 10 hours. So that's commitment to international, but it's also at that point that Jim, Rick, and I became really close, literally. So Jim was also quality focused. During the times I taught classes with Jim, I noticed how much emphasis he placed on quality work. He would ask the students to repeat their work countless times until they get it right. When preparing for a project presentation, for example, to Barilla, Italy, we rehearsed with the students way past midnight until they mastered their presentation. Jim and I faced dilemma at one time, not with the Barilla class, but with another class. The class failed to come up with good quality work that we really wanted to deliver to the client. So we asked the students to do a lot more, but they just simply couldn't, and there was not much time left. So Jim and I had 2 options. One is let the students submit their work in poor quality and fail, or help them out and do part of the project ourselves, write it up, edit it, so that we save our face and our reputation of Tabor School in Millikan. So after some deliberation, Jim said, let's do this ourselves. So we spent long hours typing up the report ourselves, and we were to just really get it at par to the quality what we wanted. We were so frustrated back then, but a few years later we managed to laugh about it and said, you know what, we'll never do this again for the students, never again. But at that point we also made it a point that students that want to get into the international consulting class, that they have a certain level of GPA, and we interview them and say, hey, you got to be committed to this class before we do some projects. And I sort of have maintained that mindset and that approach for many years after Jim retired. Jim had a passion for learning. Our consulting projects spanned different industries, ranging from a Korean sugar substitute called stevia back then, Italian food, Mexican soy beverage, New Zealand meals ready to eat kind of food, Italian cookware, and even the creation of micro-enterprise zone in Zambia. In one semester, along with the students, we quickly had to know the country, the industry in depth in order to offer really valuable solutions to our clients. This high level of inquisitiveness and commitment to learning really showcases what Jim is all about. He's all that, about a keen passion for learning. Jim also had a spirit of adventure. To Jim, our international trips and class projects were an adventure, a journey to learning. So it was an opportunity to see new places, meet new people, and learn new things. So in my mind, I still see snapshots of trips with Jim, the white sandy beach in Acapulco, the loud baseball game in the Dominican Republic, the mountainsides in Italy, where we walked, the night safari in Africa, where we drove alongside a pride of lions. To me, Jim, Rick, Sharon, who's with us today, and I will always be fellow adventurers in an academic and life journey. Jim was also very altruistic. I saw truly an altruistic person. He often prioritized the needs of others over his own. In our Zambia trip, for example, one of the students had appendicitis, of all things, in Zambia. And so we had, and the student had to be operated on. So I wanted to stay, but I need to go back because of some really academic and work and family commitments. And so Jim offered to stay behind and look after the student until she recovered. And he stayed by the student's bedside every day and called on her parents via long distance regularly using his own personal cell phone. That's how I always remember Jim. He's always very caring, always ready to lend a helping hand at all times. And I've seen this multiple times in the classroom, with students, in faculty and committee meetings, and even in our travels overseas. I'm truly blessed to have Jim Watson as a valued colleague, friend, and mentor. Millikin has been extremely lucky to have him as a member of the faculty for decades. In a recent conversation with Sharon Alpi, mutual friend and valued colleague, she described Jim as one of a kind. I completely agree, and I would add the word inimitable. Both words imply uniqueness. One of a kind implies scarcity. Inimitable implies unmatched. At Millikin, and as a friend and colleague, I think Jim Watson was simply unmatched. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Munoz. I have the pleasure to read some stories from some of Jim's colleagues, so please enjoy. Jim made a profound impact on his colleagues as well as his students. Dr. Susan Crummell, former Dean of the Tabor School of Business and Associate Professor of Management, offers these reflections. We can all think of plenty of words to describe Jim, and I'd like to add one more to the list: technology influencer. Yep, I know, I was surprised too. Jim wasn't exactly known as a technology guy, and neither was our mutual friend, Rick Bibb. Years ago, I found myself standing at a bar between Jim and Rick, both about 20 years my senior, during that era when smartphones were just beginning to make their grand entrance. I would have bet good money that Jim and Rick were going to be flip phone guys forever. And then suddenly, both of them pulled out their brand new iPhones. I was stunned. Not only did they have iPhones, but they were using them like pros, showing me features, demonstrating things, acting like they were on the Apple launch team. There I was, standing between my two older friends, realizing they were ahead of me. So yes, Jim became my unlikely technology influencer because I ordered my iPhone the very next day. The story says something about Jim. He was always open to trying new things, even if it wasn't immediately comfortable. Jim influenced me in much more meaningful way too. When he served as the interim dean of the Tabor School, I was teaching there. At the time, the university was searching for a permanent dean, and I applied for the position and almost immediately withdrew my application. It was a bit of a tumultuous time at the university, and there was a lot of uncertainties. Jim and I had many conversations about my decision. In his steady, thoughtful way, he encouraged me to reconsider. He saw something in me that I wasn't fully seeing in myself yet. Eventually, because of Jim's advice and encouragement, I reapplied, and that led to my appointment to dean, which changed the direction of my professional life. So in both small and significant ways, Jim had a gift for influencing people. Big or small, Jim made an impact, and I'm grateful he made one on me. Next, Dr. Jim Dahl, former dean of the Tabor School of Business and professor of management, recalls his memories of Dr. Watson. From my time as a new college professor to becoming dean in the Tabor School of Business, I quickly learned Jim was a beacon of light for us all. He was always encouraging, kind in his words, and very thoughtful in his answers. On many occasions, as a role model for a young faculty member learning the ropes and as a senior colleague, Jim was the go-to faculty member when trying to find your way through small and large challenges and opportunities. Whether you were wrestling with a difficult student situation or dreaming about the possibilities for the Tabor School, one would turn to Jim for his perspective and leave the conversation knowing how to navigate the road ahead. As an incredible listener who always made himself available, Jim has an easy way of providing guidance and a balanced perspective, while encouraging us to move forward in a principled way. I feel very blessed to have worked with Jim for many years. He certainly shaped the lives of many students and colleagues, including mine.
Doug Zemke, class of 1966, former trustee and Tabor School of Business dean and Milliken's 14th president, could not be here today, but wanted me to share these words and a brief story. I've known Jim for 30 years, having first met him at a Tabor planning retreat while I was a member of the Board of Trustees. My first impression was that Jim was a very serious person with great enthusiasm for expanding the curricula in order to offer more relevant experiences for our business students. He was one of the champions for experiential learning and wanted to find ways to offer international experiences, which he certainly did with zeal. It was January 1998 that I began to really experience and understand the full character of Jim Watson. I had just been named the dean of the Tabor School of Business, and Jim had been the acting dean for a significant part of 1997. He had created a detailed transitioning plan that included introductions, reference materials, and a to-do list for the first month. He also said, "You can call me anytime you need help." He meant it, and I called him often. Dr. Watson was committed to growing the professionalism of the Tabor School. He was committed to supporting his colleagues' endeavors and was the ultimate team player. He took pride in his colleagues' successes and was a trusted confidant. Jim had a great sense of humor and a wonderful positive aura and was a joy to be around. He had an office at the end of the hall that was first beset by water flowing from the ceiling, for which he simply repositioned his desk and strategically located waste cans, saying, "I don't have time to move out. I have class to teach." The disaster was later followed by his The disaster was later followed by his office being invaded by bees. That did drive him from his office. He simply gathered up his books he needed and shut the door. He joked that next would come the plague. But Jim was the consummate teacher. He made learning interesting and his classes were animated. He made subject matter relevant and practical. He also expected his students to come to his class prepared and loved the interaction with him. Jim's impact on students was his teaching of economics and international business. He has left a legacy of excellence in the teaching of international business consulting cases. He has provided students with experiences that are priceless and that have very much helped shape their careers. Dr. James Watson has positively enhanced the lives of thousands of students and is an example of what it means to be a real teacher. I am blessed to have known Jim and to have witnessed his life work. Well done, Dr. Watson. At this time, I'd like to ask my dear friend and mentor, Sharon Alpe, founder and director for the Center for Entrepreneurship, to offer her reflections. Do you want to hold?
Where's my stool?
Yeah, sorry. You want to lift you up?
I can't say enough about Jim Watson. I came here not from academia. I came here from the business world. Not real sure of what it meant to even have a spring break, a fall break. I'm going, why do we have to do this? And Jim said, let me tell you why. You will experience it and then you'll know. Well, that first year I was here, he was right. I was drowning by the time fall break came because I was to teach a course and then I was to find what entrepreneurship meant in the curriculum because it wasn't defined, hadn't been there. What I wrote, and I went and I needed someone to review what I was trying to do. And Jim Watson was the person who critiqued everything that I said, told me what the rough spots were going to be, what the faculty was going to respond to, and really helped me put together a plan that helped me with my career at Millikan. Best thing that we were able to do, though, long term, was an international consulting course in international business, because Jim was at the time, Jim was the person who did international business. There were three of us on the faculty, Jim, Rick Bibb, myself, who were at a bar, a dive bar really. It was called Chris's Place. It's not, I don't even know if it's still around, but we went there on Friday, every Friday for fish, and to discuss what happened at the week and how we would proceed and go forward. Then, that afternoon, after we were there, the president, I'm going to say this, the president came and really threw down the gauntlet to Tabor and said, you guys need to be taking the lead in international. Why aren't you doing it? So we got together that afternoon after a few beers and put together the international consulting plan that has become a critical and important part of what Tabor is. And I'm very proud of that. And Jim was at the heart of all of that, encouraging us to go along and to be part of that. He also wanted, as Mark says, the adventure of traveling with us. And it was an adventure, because I can report to you a couple of things. There were the first time we went to Malaysia in 95, 96, we got to the airport, and the airport said, your passport is not up to date. And we're standing there ready to leave on this international experience, and Jim doesn't have a passport current. It wasn't 6 months. Malaysia required you to have your passport good for 6 months before you went there. So we did. Greg and I did, but I guess Jim didn't. We guess we forgot to tell him, Trish. I don't know. Anyway, so we're standing there. What are we going to do? And Jim says, well, we're just going to go and see what happens. Okay, so we got to Malaysia at the airport, and we're trying to go through customs, and we know we're going to have a problem. And Jim says, what are we going to do? And he looks around, and I said, let's look and see who's there. Is there a woman? Is there a man? Who's the best? What's the best entryway to go through? And so we chose this woman, and behind the entryway, all our students were lined up because they were waiting to take us to our hotel. And we got to the passport entry area. They're looking at his passport, and they're saying, "This is not good. It's not within 6 months of entering Malaysia." And I was behind Jim, and I said, "See those students over there? They came, these are his students in the United States. He came all this way to see these students and be with them. And these are great Malaysian students. They're the best we've ever seen." She let us go through. So I don't know if we'd chosen the man who was there to go through there, but we chose this woman, and she let us go through. Another interesting thing that happened, while we were in Malaysia, we developed a relationship with a guy named Vela, and he was a Hindu. And he was a Hindu Indian, and he had a business that sold snack food. And this snack food had used a kind of oil that ADM produced. And so we went to the International Food Show in Florida, and this man, Vela, wanted to come over and attend this show. It was a worldwide show. It was in Florida, and he asked us if we'd help with translation. And we said yes. And I said, when we come over, would you come to the university and meet with the students? Yes, he said. And so Vela came over, made the trip from Penang, Malaysia, to Chicago, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, I get a call. "We've lost our client. It's Jim." I said, "What happened?" 3 o'clock in the morning, he wakes me up and he says, "Well, he was supposed to arrive. He wasn't on the plane. We didn't get it. We've checked every hotel around. We've lost our client." I didn't know what to do. All I could do was say, "Go find him." And I did. That's all I could say. And I don't know how they did, and I don't know what happened, but they found him. And they brought him to Millikan, and it was a great experience that the students had interacting with a person who was from Malaysia, who was eventually going to be a client for one of the snack foods that we did. I'm just telling you all the stories that we've had. Jim was a trusted colleague. He was a friend. He was a person who was honest, had integrity, and Dean Manweiler said, "Jim Watson is the conscience of the Tabor School." And he was. He kept us making when we would have arguments, and we would have arguments about what we should do, what is the strategy that we should take, who should we go after next in terms of an international client, and how would we operate. Jim was a person who laid out a very comprehensive strategy. He helped us understand what we needed to do with the students, and he was always, always a supporter of anything that we had, even the wildest hair that we could think of that we wanted to expose our students to. Expose is really the right word, because sometimes we had to take them into places that I'm not sure if their parents, well, I shouldn't say this, but I'm not sure if their parents knew. For example, we would go to Borneo to meet with an indigenous tribe that was looking at trying to sell baskets to the United States, and that frankly was a little dicey, but we managed. The students always felt that, I think, their life was enlarged, that they had a greater appreciation for what was going on, and I'll never ever be sorry about the fact that we've almost lost a student more than once when they weren't able to keep up with where we were going to be going, but we tried to make sure that they all knew. We also felt that when we put the international consulting class together, we felt that students needed to know the historical, the economic, the spiritual, the religious, and the culture that was happening in the world that they were going to be analyzing, and that was extremely important. I've never felt that Jim Watson betrayed anyone, and that's something to be said. He was true, honest, had the most integrity of anybody I've ever met, and he was so supportive, but he was always, always happy and smiling when he had to do some difficult things. One of the things that we had is that we had a student who was a brilliant student who, by a lapse of memory, cheated on a paper. He called the group of us together to say, how should we proceed? And in my mind, I felt that we ought to really look at all the circumstances and try to save this kid, because the next thing would have been for him to be expelled. Jim took great care in making the case for why we should give this kid a second chance. To this day, that kid is a brilliant, successful person, and I'm glad that we did. That was Jim Dahl. He was the friend, he was a colleague that I'm sorry everybody doesn't have, but I am grateful that I did. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sharon. I do know that we have at least a couple folks who have some stories to share. I know that Christian would like to say a few words, and I know we also have some memories that were sent in from a former student of Jim who spent some time with Jim and Trish as well. So I invite the two of them to come forward in the order they see is appropriate. And if anyone else has a memory or a tidbit to share, I'll open it up.
I'm Heather, Jim's niece, one of Jim's nieces, and I was asked to speak on behalf of Okan, who was one of the students here from Turkey that Jim and Patty, well, Jim and Trish we know her as Patty, but Jim and Trish would bring to Indiana to visit and take him in during holidays. So I'm going to read from Okan. Dear Dr. Watson, you are someone who will never be forgotten. When I met you in the Tabor School of Business, I was trying to decide whether to return to Turkey or continue my education in the United States. You stepped in and offered me the Caterpillar Scholarship, which changed my life. You were always there for me as a student far from home, helping me through many challenges, whether it was job applications, important life decisions like marriage. I still remember when I was struggling to find a job and you told me, "Okan, be patient. Someone will recognize your qualifications and you will find a job." Those were truly comforting words. When my father asked me to return to Turkey, you encouraged me to go back and show the value of education and work experience I had gained. During my time in the United States, Trish, Matthew, and Adam never left me alone during Thanksgiving and Christmas. I always felt welcomed. Not only did you, Trish, and Matthew come to Turkey to visit me and meet my future wife, but a few years later, you also attended my wedding. That meant so much to me and my family. A few years ago, my daughter asked me which country I loved besides Turkey. I told her it was the United States because of you, Trish, and your family. The world no longer feels the same to me without you. There is a Turkish verse that says, "Death is ordained by God. If only there were no longing." Rest in peace, Dr. Watson. Okan, Camille, Elif, and Melise. Jim was also my partner in cards, so I'm going to miss that. I won't miss him at one game when he would always play Trump first, but.
I didn't plan for this, so bear with me, but I've come a long way to be here, and I feel honored to be here and honor Jim and be with you, Trish, on this occasion. My name is Christian. I was fortunate to spend a year in high school here in Decatur, Illinois. When I planned on going to the United States, to me, United States was California, Florida, and maybe New York. And when the organization I signed up with told me I was going to Decatur, Illinois, I got the book we had in school, the school atlas for the younger people, no Google Maps back then. And there was no Decatur, Illinois, nowhere to be found. So I had to go to the library in Frankfurt where I lived and found a book where it actually had the city of Decatur. So finally I knew where I was going, and I thought, ooh, you could not be further away from an ocean than this place, or mountains, as I like to ski. But I said, well, we'll give it a trial. We'll try to make the best of it. And it turned out to be the best decision of my life to not backpedal out of going to Decatur, Illinois, because Trish and Jim not only opened their doors, but they opened their hearts to myself and took me in as part of their family. And Decatur was a great home for a year. I loved going to MacArthur High School. Many very fun memories. But living with you, Jim and Trish, really changed the whole trajectory of my life. And I have so many very fun memories. And also, for me, it was a first being in a family with other children, because at home I was an only child, and I was not used to having brothers, let alone small brothers or young brothers, like Matthew and Adam being 3 and 6 at the time. And I remember one evening you also trusted your children on me, which I thought was pretty brave, to trust a 16-year-old child to look after 2 other children, but I signed up for it. And your older brother, Matthew, talked me into doing a pillow fight with the 2 of you. And you're probably not going to remember this. So of course I agreed. Thought this was going to be fun. And not being used to smaller children, only used to doing pillow fights with people my size and weight, I hit you with the pillow like I would hit someone my weight. And you flew across the entire living room and crashed, luckily, into the sofa, not into the wall. And mind me saying, Adam, you may not like me for this, but you cried quite a bit. what I am thankful for to this day is that you just stopped crying before Jim and Trish came home. And you had that wonderful smile that you always had on your face. And when they entered and said, "Everything okay?" I said, "Oh, everything was wonderful, perfect." And then that year for your birthday, you were into He-Man, and I think there is a He-Man movie out right now, but He-Man was very big back then. And I got you a He-Man sword, and it made these really annoying sounds when you used it. And Trish and Jim did not like me for this gift. And they did not like me as much as when later I had a family and I have children, you would keep on sending gifts over that made terrifying noises. And one of them is, and Jim picked out this music instrument for children that my 8-year-old daughter uses to this day, annoyingly so. But yeah, that's one of the very many fond memories. You also may not know that Jim actually made part of a piece of world history. This happened, it was your birthday weekend, Trish, in June 1987, so some time ago. You visited me in Frankfurt, and we decided for your birthday weekend to take a trip to Berlin. Berlin back then was a divided city, of course, and our country, Germany, was divided as well. And to get to Berlin from Frankfurt, there was 2 autobahns that you could take that you were allowed to drive on. You had to cross the border, yeah, I see the look on your face. It was a scary experience. The East German police searching your car, you had to get out of your vehicle, and as you had to enter into East Germany, you'd then drive for 3 hours, and then you would get to Berlin and cross the border into West Berlin, where we as Germans were allowed to stay. So as they were searching our car, and we were standing there, and they finally looked at Jim's passport, and it was valid. No problem there, but it happened to be the same weekend, and this is now a very famous day in German history, that Ronald Reagan visited West Berlin. All of a sudden, this East German border guard, who was very feisty and like a German in those old movies with the pickle hat on, and all of a sudden he became funny, and he saluted in front of Jim and said, "Welcome, Mr. Reagan, to the East German Republic." And so I just called Jim Ronnie for the rest of this trip. And as we drove, Jim said, "Well, can we stop someplace? I want to take a picture of East Germany." And there was actually one parking spot where you could stop for, just get out of the car during this 2 or 3 hour drive. And so I stopped the car, Jim got out, there was a little hill, and all you saw was countryside. I don't know if it was cornfields or whatever it was, but it was just countryside, so there's nothing there. Jim got out and took a picture. I think he had a camera with those Ritzratsch cameras in Germany. Took a picture, and just as we were getting into the car, a car pulls up behind us, Russian-made Lada. I remember this to this day. And as a German, you knew who drove Ladas in East Germany. It was not the regular people. And 2 guys got out of the car wearing trench coats. And we looked at each other like, this cannot be real. And so they walked to the same spot where Jim was, and they got a camera out and took a picture. And we looked at each other, and I said back then, I said, well, one day we need to find out about this picture, because this cannot be a coincidence. So years later, I actually took the time to look at the archives of the secret police that are now open to the public. And you can go in, and if you can look for your file. And there was actually a file, and it was a picture of that countryside in there. And we were right. We had thought this was secret police, and it turned out it was secret police taking the same picture as Jim. So that I thought was funny in its own way. So we continued to Berlin, and we get to Berlin, and the first thing Jim wanted to see was the wall, right, in the middle of Berlin. So I took Jim and Trish there, and there's this little overlook where President Kennedy gave a famous speech some years ago. And we looked over the wall, and Jim said to me, well, one day you're going to have one country again. I said, Jim, you're crazy. Yeah, you're absolutely crazy. I was 19 years old. I knew it all. I had seen the world, and I was so fond of my opinion. I said, this country will never be united. This is the bad guys over there, we're the good guys, and this will never come together, and this will never happen. And he looked at me and said, well, you just wait. You just wait. And an hour later, Ronald Reagan in Berlin gave a speech saying, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And I thought, wow, we have two crazies in the city the very same day. But since the border guard called Jim Ronald Reagan, who knows whether it was really Ronald Reagan, maybe it was Jim giving the speech in disguise. But one of the very many memories, and sure enough, less than 2 years later, the world changed, our country changed, and just as Jim or Ronald had said, it so happened. And this is, again, some of the very fond memories, and I could go on, but I'm not going to bore you with more stories. And just wanted to say thank you, Jim, thank you, Trish, for taking me into your life, being lifelong friends. And I hope the day Jim passed, more people like Jim were born somewhere. The world needs them. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to share a memory or a story?
Wow, I'm Patty's youngest brother, Kevin. Jim was my brother-in-law, and my brother Mike and Nancy, and just sitting here listening to all you folks talk about Jim. He was amazing. We knew him as Jimmy Crack Corn. Jim would always come up for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and our mom always had to make fudge for Jim because that's what he ate all the time, and if there's any scraps left, Jim will eat it. So,
oh, actually, he's a good cook.
well, yeah, that's right, but we're all going to miss Jim. I didn't know all of your stories. I think the people in Culver, Indiana had no idea of the impact that he had on you. I remember after our dad died, we always used to have water fights. So Jim, being Jim, he was dressed in a suit, and the house was two-story with the roof on that you could walk all the way around the house. So we took a bucket of water up on top of the roof and followed Jim around, and we dumped that 5-gallon bucket of water on Jim in his suit, and our Aunt Betty said, "You guys leave him alone."
And we all locked the door.
Yeah, we wouldn't let him in, but you know, we put Jim on a mower one time, and he went out and mowed the front yard, and when he got done, we had to go back and mow it over again because
Well, you're really persnickety about that.
well, we are persnickety, but he was kind of mowing in circles, so, but I
Daddy
did,
did let him plant one time.
yeah, I let him plant wheat one time too, and we had to go back, but put him on a tractor, but we're all going to miss him very much, so thank you.
As I think about the stories that have been shared today, whether they're from colleagues, from former students, from friends, from family. They all see a different lens of Jim, but it's still the same Jim no matter what the story. And I think that's really neat about this gathering of folks today and those who are coming here to celebrate his life. Jim and Trish also established an endowed scholarship about 10 years ago for Tabor students. Their generosity has supported over 20 students with $25,000 in support. Millikan was so integral to their lives that they chose to invest in the next generation of students and make a lasting impact. If you feel led today or in the future, you're invited to support their scholarship, and you can do so at the back of the reception area. And I'd also like to ask that if you haven't had a chance to sign the guest registry, please do so before you leave. In closing, it's often said that we stand on the shoulders of those who come before us. While Jim was collaborating on projects with folks like Mark, Sharon, Doug, Rick Bibb, and many other colleagues, and while he was making a difference in the lives of countless students, he was passing on his legacy to others through his actions, his mentorship, his wit, and his kindness. I think we all can learn from Jim and do our part in passing his legacy on to others we encounter in our lives. Again, it means a lot to see you all here today. Please continue to share in all the wonderful stories and memories, maybe the stories that weren't necessarily appropriate at this podium, but please go share them with each other and continue to share them in the future. So again, thank you for being here.